Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Welcome to Islamicity. I am Anwar Jhetam, joined by the co-founder of Islamicity, Hasan Labuschagne. Today, inshallah, for the 11th episode in Islamicity Weekly, we'll be having a recap discussion over the last 10 podcasts that we've hosted over the last 10 weeks. Inshallah, today we will be reflecting over some of the discussions that we've had with a dynamic group of guests from a dynamic and wide range of different fields and backgrounds. And we will be reflecting on some of the things that we learned in the process of podcasting and hosting various guests for the many discussions that we hosted over the last almost 2 months. Over this last 10 weeks, we've hosted various different discussions on very pertinent topics, I feel. And we've hosted a wide range of guests coming with different skills, specialities, experiences. What has stood out for you in the 10 weeks?
I think one thing that perhaps this was just taqdeer, perhaps this was just divine predestination. And perhaps, I hope, inshallah, that it's a good sign and it says something about who we are as an organization and who we are as, podcasters or budding young social media content creators. But our first real Islamicity Weekly episode since we've started Islamicity 2.0 was Is Dawah Failing in South Africa? And I think that it shows both of us have a concern for seeing Islam prosper in South Africa, for seeing Islam reach every household. I just thought about it. We didn't really outline that we want to do this kind of topic because we feel a certain way or because there's something that's pressing. It just came out sort of organically. And I think it's a good indication of where we come from and where we're headed and what we are concerned about. And obviously we make dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, assists all of the du'at in South Africa. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, facilitates for them to spread the deen of Islam in South Africa, and that we can, improve and refine that process and troubleshoot and see what's wrong, what the wrong approaches are, what the correct approaches are. But yeah, that's something that stood out to me.
I have to concur with you. I think both of us, we definitely believe in the idea that one, in the near future, as close as 100 years, or as long as 500 years from now, we want to see South Africa a Muslim majority country, where the majority of people are believing in Islam and are successful in this life and ultimately successful in the akhirah as well, inshallah. And that's only going to come through Islam. And starting off with da'wah, a discussion about da'wah, about how is Islam developing and propagating, growing organically within South Africa, it's indicative of that shared vision. What is very interesting about that discussion is to see, for example, the various, da'wah initiatives, but also, really reflecting upon how we actually taking da'wah strategy seriously, or, is da'wah type of like, a slogan we used to say, oh, we're doing da'wah, and that means kind of like anything goes. It's not thought out. We're not, applying ourselves in the best possible manner to be able to spread the message and create awareness about Islam, or even just to insert that, that seed of thought in people's minds. So that strategy regarding da'wah is key. And for me, that was a big take me home, from the discussion that we had with the various du'at, the various da'wah workers that we hosted.
I think all of the episodes that we've had so far, in some way, the topic or some of the takeaway points from those discussions are good takeaways for da'wah. At the end of the day, all of it kind of overlaps and gives you some pointers and some things to ponder when you're thinking about da'wah and you're thinking about how Islam is being presented in South Africa. Like for instance, we had a discussion on Muslim business owners and how they treat their customers and how they treat their employees. And that's obviously also a point to ponder for du'at. If you're a business owner, how do you treat your employees? If you're an employee, what's your duty towards your employer, etc. And then later on, we went back more directly into Dawah when we spoke, for instance, about Kasi Islam, like the South African Black Muslim community, and how I think it's perhaps wrong-headed to just every time we speak about them, we think about da'wah, like, our emphasis is on da'wah, but what about that Black South African Muslim community that already exists, and how do they organize themselves? Um, so I think we've sort of consistently stayed. There's like a golden thread that runs through all of the episodes that has something to do with da'wah, or there's some applicability to da'wah. So yeah, I think I like that about us. I don't want that necessarily to change. Of course, I don't want every episode to be about da'wah, but I'd like there to be takeaways for da'wah, and I'd like everything we do to sort of give people something to think about with regards to how they present Islam and how they can be ambassadors of Islam.
I have to concur with you. Firstly, I think that, we as South Africans, and I don't know why we are conditioned this way, but we feel or we've narrowed the definition of da'wah to basically just like propagation, and not as seeing it as everything that is servicing Islam and, striving in the cause of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so for that, for example, the South African Black Muslim community, what usually comes to mind is, oh, someone has to propagate there, the numbers of Muslims has to grow. But what are the other type of, let's say, services that Muslims that live within the South African Black community? What are the type of services that they need in terms of the deen? I think that discussion with Sheikh Iman Zwide Kelanga, as well as with Sheikh Bilal Imkizwana, was very insightful into, for them, from their perspective as young imams working within their communities, within the kasi, what's their perspectives, in terms of like nurturing communities. I think what is also useful is the discussion that we had regarding, the visit of Sheikh Dr. Omar Suleiman to South Africa to unpack, and this needs to be explored more in detail, inshallah, to unpack, for example, our ability to tolerate other Muslims, and to engage with different methodologies, and to be able to appreciate differences of opinion beyond just, nicely worded things in an Islamic textbook, but to actually bring that etiquette of disagreement, that adab al-ikhtilaf, to bring it out in reality. It was interesting, to see his visit here in South Africa, and also to see the community's reaction. The vast majority of South African Muslims welcomed him. They loved what he had to say. It was fantastic. But naturally, there were those that held a different opinion. But for me, it's not the opinion that you hold, but rather so much as like, how do you express that opinion? And for me, that was very instructive looking at the society. So that's why I felt we had to discuss, his visit, because it's not just about him. It's about how do we engage other scholars and other individuals coming from other parts of the world, or they're just not like us. They have, they're different to us. But ultimately, they're human beings, they're Muslims. We have to engage them.
I think a key takeaway for me was just that at the end of the day, the proof is in the pudding when it comes to popularity. Not that any imam or sheikh sets out to gain popularity. That's not an intention. In fact, that's the opposite probably of what you should be looking for. But the kind of reach and influence that an alim gets, or that a scholar or just the da'i gets internationally, it comes down to how much work they put in, and how, if they have to cultivate a wide reach by producing videos, producing content that's current and that people end up consuming. And so the average Muslim in South Africa who's got access to a smartphone during Ramadan, they 10 to 1 they came across Sheikh Umar Suleiman's series on Ramadan. So they watch that every day. And they're not interested in all of the ikhtilafat and all of the differences of opinion between the local scholars. They find benefit in that small 1 or 2 minute video that they watch every day in Ramadan. So the work needs to be put in. And at the same time, some of the Habaib from Yemen came to visit our shores as well. And they're basically doing the same thing. A lot of them are, I don't want to say they're content creators, but they do create a lot of content and they put it out there. They spread it. They're not influencers in the negative sense of it. They're influencers in the good sense. So, you're not going to reach a large audience if you limit yourself and restrict yourself to like pamphlets and agony aunt columns on Facebook and that kind of thing. You need to put in the work, produce, stay current. And I think Sheikh Umar Sulaiman is proof of that.
I agree with you. I think the results, inshallah, they speak for themselves, and inshallah, we hope that Allah accepts it because everyone we husnul dhan, have good opinion of others, which is part of the deen. Everyone has a good intention, and everyone is doing this here for the pleasure of Allah Subhanahu wa Taala. Methodologies may differ, and we can have serious concerns about different methodologies. But as long as it's within the larger ambit of Islam, and Islam is bigger than our own narrow confines, then we just gotta basically say, what, the world's a big place, different strokes for different folks.
Yeah, I agree. Within obviously within limits. So there's some people who don't cast a very wide net when it comes to what they allow and what they tolerate. But I believe we've got a fairly open-minded and tolerant and accommodative view, which is sound. It's authentic. It comes from authentic sources. It's from the manhaj or the methodology of the ulama, and it's a traditional view that we hold. Many of the traditional scholars did cast a very wide net. Even Ibn Taymiyyah, rahimahullah, closer to his passing, he cast his net so wide that he said a Muslim is anyone who faces the Kaaba when they make salah. So, we need to keep things like that in mind, and we can't at this point afford to exclude and alienate just everyone, because where do you draw the line? At the end of the day, everyone becomes a disbeliever around you if you don't have a line. And I think it was a good podcast, and we did had some interesting discussions on those scholars who visited us. But I think the next episode we did was really informative for me personally, specifically the one about South African Muslim organizations and whether they are perpetuating like a dependency syndrome, whether they are doing toxic charity. Because we're a country where there is unfortunately a poverty epidemic. Um, and this is a question we need to ponder as Muslims, are our good intentions actually having an effect on the ground the way we would like to? All of us want to do good, all of us want to give, but is our sadaqat, is it doing what we intended to do, or is it actually creating more dependence or creating, welfare clients?
I'm with you on that, and I also feel like, for example, just like in da'wah, when in yeah, I meaning it in the sense of calling to Islam, right, inviting people towards the deen, in the distribution and the management of the various sadaqat, so your zakah, your sadaqah, your lillah, uh, whatever contributions that we're making, there has to be a strategy, there has to be a long-term vision. Um, we have to be thinking along the lines of like, okay, you're a minority, but many parts of this minority community is very well resourced and very well intentioned and very generous. So it's good intentions, it's good resources and generosity. Now, how do you take all of those three elements and maximize, the good that they could possibly attain through their, sadaqat, and how can you get the biggest bang for your buck in terms of what you're contributing to society. So again, there a clear strategy based on clear goals is necessary because one of the things that was perhaps not necessarily said in that podcast, but both Sheikh Ibrahim Mokhabudi and Sheikh Suhail Wadi, what they both do know based on their practical experiences on the ground is that we do have charitable contributions of the Muslim community being used in a way that it's just there to pepper over the cracks of government and the failings of government and the failings of society, as a whole. So we have to ask ourselves in part of that question is that, are we there to fill in the gaps, the cracks, or do we actually want to develop people? Because if we're just filling the cracks and the gaps of government, they'll invite you for all the conferences and all the meetings and all of that, but ultimately you're just basically doing the work that they were supposed to do. So we have to think in terms of development, in terms of development as in uh, almost, yes, you're willing to work with government and other like-minded individuals, but at the end of the day, you have an end goal that you're working towards. So, it's not just about willy-nilly distribution of people's resources, which is an amana, but rather about, a focused, value-driven, goal-orientated way of managing and distributing the various sadaqat, being the charities of Islam.
I was thinking of how something that came through to me, especially speaking to Sheikh Ibrahim Qabudi, was that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, for instance, when he speaks about sadaqat and, giving charity, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu anfiqu min tayyibati ma kasabatum. So give, oh you believe, give out, spend from what you have earned. And that iktisab, that earning is more than just what you get paid at the end of the month. It's more than just your salary. Because your iktisab is it can cover, um, depending on how generous and how charitable you are with your interpretation, but in a way, it speaks also about your deeds, your amal, your knowledge that you acquire. So there's a need for skills transfer in sadaqah as well. So some of the sadaqah that you give is not necessarily monetary, it's skills development. So giving over skills and teaching people some basic financial acumen so that whatever they receive, they can manage their finances so well that at the end of the day, they might be in a stronger position where they can start spending on others in the same way. And that knowledge transfer is what we really need, instead of just doling out a parcel every month, food parcel, giving some people tin goods or giving them 100 rand here, 200 rand there, because that at the end of the day just digs them further into a hole.
Absolutely, and that lends us to, if we can skip along slightly, the very important discussion that we hosted with Sister Zahira Bam Ismail and Sheikh Abdul Rahman Layli regarding basically Muslim professionals, and both of them coming from strong professional backgrounds. Um, and their take and their opinions on how do professionals contribute. And here you are talking about skills development, which really skills development also has to include mentoring and coaching. It's not just about sitting in a class or going for a course or something of the sort. It's much more than that there. I mean, we've both benefited from having good mentors, and we know about mentoring. But what do professionals contribute to society beyond just their various sadaqat, their charities to society, their involvement, their time, their energy, their knowledges, their knowledge, and their wide networks. That was a very insightful discussion. One of the poignant things that stood out in that discussion was about the idea of ihsan, working with excellence. Like everybody wants to be associated with gift of the givers and Islamic relief, and it's really about their excellence in delivery and the way in which they work. And in this podcasting journey of 10 episodes thus far, we've definitely learned, like, in the media space, so, okay, rather starting to learn, to be honest, in the media space, what does excellence actually look like in terms of preparation, inviting guests, delivery. It's an ongoing, constantly refining process. There's no perfect model, but it's something to strive for. But ultimately, coming down to the discussion is that Muslim professionals need to make the conscientious choice to get more involved in society and in an unapologetically Islamic and Muslim way.
I think the beauty of our communities is that we still have the concept of tarbiyah, because a lot, even if you just go to maktab madrasa as a Muslim, many Muslims, they go to primary school and then in the afternoon they go to maktab madrasa. They learn, they learn how to take wudu, they learn some du'as, they learn how to basically make salah and the basic things. And then after that, they never really pursue any more serious study. But even your khalifa, like they call you in the Western Cape, your khalifa is your usually female teacher. That is a connection that you build and that you maintain throughout the rest of your life, regardless of how much you are implementing what you've learned. And that is really like a tarbiyah relationship where your teacher is not just a teacher where when you leave the classroom, they just become another random person. Outside of the classroom, they just someone else that you happen to know. That tarbiyah relationship means that person is your murabbi. They're a mentor in many things, and they have a massive impact on your life. And so we need to maintain that cultural phenomena, or that, well, it's not really cultural, that Islamic virtue of having a murabbi, of having that relationship with someone who can guide you and mentor you, because that is going to mold a generation of Muslim professionals that have values, that have good principles that they stick to when they deal with their employees and when they deal with the broader public. But I think maybe I want to move on now, since we're speaking about employees and employers and about professionals. One of our podcasts that had the biggest uh, interest. A lot of people were debating us, and people were making comments, and got a lot of traction, a lot of attention, was the one on Muslim bosses. Do Muslims make bad bosses? And I'm just reading now from the YouTube comments. So one of the people said here, some Muslim bosses are not worth the Muslim title. And we had many very strong sentiments on both sides from the employers. Many of the people who commented were employers who were sort of defending themselves, or they were mentioning how they run their business. And a lot of people were employees. I think significantly many more were employees who were complaining about the experiences they've had. So I think we've struck a nerve there. And we've struck on something that's really important in our society that we need to talk about.
Absolutely. I think that is a discussion that one is very relevant to everyone. Everyone has an employment experience, or most of us in society do have some type of an employment experience, or, your interaction with those that you are working for, or, the other way around, your interactions with those that you are employing, your workers, and what those interactions are like. And ultimately, that's akhlaq in action. That's really what's it about. I think that's an area that I feel that a lot more effort in terms of education is necessary in our society on behalf of, ulama, du'at, teachers, anyone that is basically preparing the next generation to say, you know what, you one day going to be working for someone, you one day going to be having people work for you in your organization, whether it's a business, whatever it may be. How do you actually treat them and start to ingrain that into people from a very, very young age. Cultivating entrepreneurs is definitely something needed in some parts of South African society. It's something that has been happening for generations. That's a good thing, alhamdulillah. But with that, we need to basically double down on the thing about how do we actually treat people, because that's your immediate da'wah that we're giving to people, whether they are working for us, or they are customers, or they are people that are experiencing the services that we are rendering. So I think that's an important da'wah area that we need to be very forthright about, and we need to start getting it right. The narrative needs to change that Muslims don't make bad bosses. Muslims make excellent bosses because of Islam. And that's a tarbiyah discussion. And regarding tarbiyah, we hosted Sheikh Shakir Bayat of the Deen team and Hafid Ahmed Solomon of Youth Mastery. And again, the discussion there was really, are we deliberate about our actions? Are we deliberate about youth development? They are experts in the field doing phenomenal work in terms of youth, alhamdulillah. And may Allah increase them in their efforts and, grant them all the success, inshallah, because we need more like them. They are really filling in a very big, big gap that exists in our society. The discussion with them was very insightful because, like Shakir Bayat kept mentioning, we're not there for kids' entertainment. We have a higher purpose. And that higher purpose is basically to get kids conscientious of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a way that's practical to life, and not in some mythical, fantastical idea of what people envisage piety to be, but in a way that actually makes a tangible difference in people's lives. And I think, again, that's an area of work that the South African Muslim community needs to double down on. We need to support it. We need to be more deliberate about it. And if we do that, maybe the next generation or few generations from now, they will actually be leading the society in which we live in a way in which I think we will all be very proud about, inshallah.
Yeah, I think that episode specifically for me was one where I just sat back and basically listened and took pointers, because um, I really benefited a lot from the discussion, just listening, because it's amazing to have people who are experts in a field when you can see the energy and passion and enthusiasm about what they're talking about and what they're doing. And I just saw that for instance, Hafid Ahmad. Solomon. He's like, his entire being just radiates energy whenever he speaks about what he's doing and how we can get kids involved and how we can, solidify these Islamic principles in their lives. He just like, he brightens up completely, he just gets energized. And that was for me, it was infectious for me. It really, it impacted me greatly. And, so I hope to, inshallah, implement a lot of what we've learned in that episode in my own work. But definitely, it's one of the things that stood out for me was that, it was mentioned that we set our goals in concrete and we draw our plans in sand. So our goal with regards to dawah, our goal with regards to creating better Muslims, becoming better Muslims ourselves first and foremost, and then creating good, solid Muslims from amongst our youth. We have that goal, but the plan to how we get there is drawn in sand, so we can change it up anytime, as the need arises. And in today's rapidly changing world, that's unfortunately one of the things we have to do all the time. We have to keep readjusting and doing damage control and changing a little thing here, tweaking something here. So we need to remain flexible in the way that we approach our children and remain current as well, so that we know that the young people of our ummah, um, they don't feel alienated from us, specifically from ulama. Ulama need to be accessible because otherwise we are just the entire ulama fraternity will just become a relic. It will become something of the past that once existed, and now nobody consults them anymore. They just have internal disputes on the internal ulama mailing list, but it doesn't really go anywhere. So I think that reaching our youth is very important, and I found that episode extremely beneficial.
On that, the use of, you know, the use of technology as a relevant tool. I mean, what I found like amazing was, for example, Sheikh Shakir Bayat spoke about, them using habit trackers with the youth that they are mentoring, for certain daily things like Salah, Quran, Dhikr, Salawat, even, physical exercise, reading, amazing things. I found this really brilliant, mashallah. And when I look at, for example, like what they want to do with the youth, and this takes us to the discussion on Palestine. Uh, we're still living through the situation in Gaza right now, the genocide that's taking place. But the discussion with Sheikh Ibrahim Musa and uh, brother Arshad Samuddin, was basically pointed to the fact that tarbiyah took place in Palestine, particularly in Gaza. That's why we, almost 2 years into a genocide, we can see the type of resilience and resistance to the occupation. So if we are ever talking about, we want iman at the level of the people of Palestine, that even they're living through the worst of circumstances, but they have not forgotten Allah, and that is absolutely true and absolutely beautiful. Then it starts off for me by saying, what, how are we developing our youth? And that's where people, experts like Shakir Bayat and Ahmed Solomon comes in, and we need to be supporting their work. That discussion with Ibrahim Musa and Arshad Samuddin, in terms of our attitude as South Africans living here in a peaceful society, but in terms of our activism, that really shed light on the more that we need to do, and not being comfortable with government taking the Israelis to the ICJ. We have to do more. I know that the way we phrased that particular podcast discussion, perhaps, some people may have found it like kind of like as if we were deliberately attacking the community by saying, are South African Muslims betraying Palestine? But there's a lot of internal reflection that needs to be done. We have to take stock of our activism. And again, it's about a deliberate strategy in asking what's your clear goals that you want to achieve. Because there's a lot of things going on. We don't want to just be making noise in the streets in 70 years later or 78 years later. We're still stuck in the same rut.
Look, as may perhaps controversial or as sort of challenging as the title might have been, are we failing Palestine? I think a lot of people are asking themselves that question. So it shows some solidarity in the sense that we're thinking about the same thing, we're feeling the same way, we can empathize and understand each other. And even nowadays, there's the term going around Palestine fatigue or Gaza fatigue. And this is something that shouldn't exist. We can't. I mean, as Muslims, we're one ummah. If one part of the body is paining, then the whole body aches. We can't have fatigue and say, oh, I'm tired of seeing these videos. I'm tired of seeing these clips. I'm tired of worrying about children in Gaza. I just want to go on with my life. Uh, that's a kind of exhaustion that we can't complain about. And I believe there was an optimistic edge to, there was a silver lining to our discussion where we could see that the people who are heading up organizations in South Africa that, um, advance the pro-Palestine cause, there are people who are enthusiastic and optimistic in spite of what is happening, in spite of the pain that we feel, in spite of the helplessness sometimes that we feel. Those people are still going about their business and doing what has to be done. Uh, Nevertheless, in spite of that, regardless. So I think that's a good, like a silver lining that we see these people and look up to them as leaders in the Palestine solidarity movement. And you see they're just keeping on, they're grinding on, doing what needs to be done. And we need to accept that as something we just have to do as Muslims. We can't have Palestine fatigue or Gaza fatigue. We just need to keep working for it and believing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to um, make our efforts fruitful, inshallah.
Amin, and fruitful in our lifetime by seeing the liberation of Palestine and Masjid al-Aqsa al-Mubarak in our lifetime, inshallah. Uh, I think this has been an excellent catch up in terms of, what we have learned from these 10 podcasts that we've hosted. And inshallah, as we go along, hoping that the next set of podcasts that we host on some very, very pertinent topics, which we've planned going forward, that we continue to learn, and that also largely our society is transformed positively through, the small contribution that we are making in terms of the necessary social discussions that needs to be taking place. People will ask, like, why are you guys even hosting these podcasts, and you have like controversial topics and long-winded discussions. But ultimately, we know that in majority of our communities here in the South African Muslim community, we don't have the opportunity of actually having these type of discussions in the public. So Islamicity Weekly is basically just a platform in which we can start to have some of the necessary discussions. And going forward, we look to having more of these type of discussions to contribute in a small, meaningful way to changes that will be for the betterment of our society, inshallah.
I mean, Ya Rob, we hope, inshallah, to be a force for good and to extend our reach, but extend our reach into the community for the purpose of the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's what we're ultimately concerned with. Ultimately, that's all that matters is, if our Rabb is pleased with us. And we'll keep putting the effort in, inshallah. We'll keep hosting these conversations, these much needed conversations. And inshallah, we make dua that will grow and that will always be a vehicle for people to articulate what they're feeling and the things that they need to speak about, and important issues that need to be discussed in our communities that they might not have a platform to do on elsewhere. So, we don't want to alienate people. We want to be the space where people feel comfortable to discuss the things they feel are important. And inshallah, to host people who can provide guidance, expert guidance on those topics via our guests. So inshallah, we make dua for the future that this grows, that this effort grows, and that Allah, blesses it and favors it. And I think we'll have more interesting things to talk about definitely in the future, inshallah. But also maybe just a plug. Hit the like button, hit subscribe. I'll do the influencer thing now. Smash the like button, and more to come, inshallah.
Amin. Shukran jazilan, Hasan. It was excellent catching up with you. And I look forward to future conversations, inshallah. Jazakallah khairah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
عليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.